surveyed all of our players. We're currently in the process of compiling that feedback and to set up what we're going to change for next year and improve on. But overall, it was a great event. We're very happy. We got great feedback from the players, and we're already excited about our second one.
Awesome. Congratulations on the first one. I saw the recap video that y'all produced, and looked like a wonderful event. A lot of wonderful beginnings to a lot of great events in the future for sure. So congratulations. Colton, this one's for you. So this summer, USGA conducted its third US Adaptive Open. Previously been at Pinehurst and then St. Creek Station. Next year, you're going to Woodmont Country Club, and this will be the third different site for this event. What are some of the important factors that the USGA considers when selecting a host site for the US Adaptive Open?
Yeah, I think there's three main things sort of that we look at when we're on these future site visits. One being, your golf course. Overall, generally flat is ideal. If there are slopes, make sure they're gradual. And as you kind of work through the progression of a golf course, from teeing areas, a variety of tees, a lot of different teeing options to accommodate different impairment categories. Your bunkers is something that we want to look at on these future site visits, whether there's an access point for a bunker or not. And if not, you got your local rule that we've had at every Adaptive Open, and you have the option to take the bunker out for players with low mobility devices. And then, you got your crossings. You don't want too many forced carries, whether it's water or kind of bunkers fronting the green. It's not really a level of play. It's just some different impairments have kind of a lower trajectory shot. So that's something that we kind of try to shy away from if possible when we're looking at golf courses. The second point would be your clubhouse and facility accessibility. From not only from an ADA compliance standpoint, but you want the clubhouse and the hardscapes on site to be convenient. So from the time a player arrives, into player registration, player dining, locker rooms, onto the golf course and in the practice areas, it's kind of where, as golf administrators, we can combine that ADA education, which the Alliance obviously has a lot of great free resources online and been covered in the webinars, but also where you can combine your experience as a golf administrator. You know how player flow works best, so marrying those two things and making sure it's an option at the facilities that you're at. And the third thing I would recommend is going to a club that you have a previous relationship with. One that, not only just club members, but definitely the staff, because, it's something that we emphasize with all championships, I think, but with the adaptive especially, there's going to be a lot of changes that have to happen, changes on the fly, and we want to have that strong relationship, which Matt, like you mentioned, is a big reason why we started at Pinehurst and why we continue to go to clubs that have previously hosted USGA championships.
Great. Mario, kind of along those lines, obviously finding a suitable site for this audience is imperative to its success. I think you all used two facilities for your championship recently, so maybe share kind of your approach to finding a suitable location for a championship. And then also, what was some of the feedback from the members, the club, the staff, just kind of post-championship?
So this year we were at two sites, and it was more of a scheduling thing than anything else based on the time of year and the access we had to the golf courses. We will go to one site for future years for the event. I would say that one of the cool things has been, especially with golf, as popular as it is right now, we heard all those numbers this morning in the opening session. A lot of times these days, finding a golf course to host one of our championships seems more like an obligation to the club. But what we've discovered with adaptive golf is this is now something the clubs are going to look at as an opportunity instead. We've already had both of our host sites for this year have expressed interest in bringing us back, which is a great sign for how everything went. We also have another site we're working on for our second edition, but we had a lot of volunteers out there from a variety of GiA&x member clubs who offered up their courses and to help us kind of get things started to have that process of hosting it at their club as well. Year one's difficult because people don't know what to expect. And then when they saw what we did and they saw all the things that went into it and all the positive publicity the club gets and all the things that we're able to do to put that club in a good spotlight, we're going to have a lot of options in the future that we didn't have this year. Our club volunteers were really bought into the concept, which is great. So we expect those numbers to continue to rise. We actually had our volunteers go through Dave's training program, so I'm sure he'll talk about, but everything was really great from a club standpoint. Once we got the golf course started, the golf tournament started, the feedback's been really good. The only thing I would say is, if you know anybody who can find a way to turn the wind down in the afternoon, maybe we could use that, but otherwise, it was great.
Awesome. Colton, I know you mentioned a few things just a second ago, kind of going back to the facility and the build out, kind of all the different things that kind of outside the ropes that are required for an adaptive golf field. Can you touch on some of those things that as you're working with these host sites, to host the US Adaptive Open, what are some of those things that everyone kind of needs to be mindful of if they're interested in conducting an adaptive championship?
Yeah, a couple of things that are appropriate to mention right now as we kind of are looking towards 2025 and working with Woodmont on some of these items like you mentioned, the outside the ropes aspect. Seated carts is always a priority for us in securing those and knowing where they come from. I think that's the biggest question for a lot of us is kind of where do you get them. I know that again the Alliance sending out surveys and working with HGAs and member clubs to kind of locate those and have a better idea moving forward of where to find them. But also kind of once they're on site, you have to consider where they're going, where they're going to be charged and stored. They each require individual outlets. And as well as trailers, you get a lot of 10 by 12s and 8 by 10s and kind of where all those goes into your seated players. But not only the seated carts, but just your typical golf carts. Unless you're at like a 36-hole facility in adaptive golf, generally the players will take their own cart, having equipment and a lot of times needing a caddy. It just is the sort of a standard that we've seen across all adaptive competitions where players will take their own cart. So may have to bring in some additional carts, and that kind of brings the question of where do you store those and where do you charge those. And then just social events are big with the adaptive community, but also making sure that those go off correctly, working with your F&B managers to make sure the menu's appropriate. A lot of times, you won't want something that you can cut with or food that you need to cut with a fork and a knife. And seeing as you'll have a lot of one-arm players in the field. Cocktail kind of hours are usually something that we don't do. The players may not be comfortable standing for long periods of time. And then as you're setting up these events, your tables and your chairs, kind of the single pedestal bases tables are usually not ADA compliant. Kind of long tablecloths where wheelchair wheels could get caught are usually not good. And then just generally having more space is always a good idea as you're looking at these different venues. Again, I'll keep plugging the Alliance, but a lot of this stuff is on there. They got interactive maps, and as long as you're using those resources that are available online, you can kind of walk through those steps with your potential host clubs on the outside of those elements.
Awesome, thanks, Colton. That's a perfect segue to Dave. So, Dave, first of all, thanks for the webinar sessions that you led recently with the community. Hopefully, you all had an opportunity to participate in those and follow along. But obviously, the Alliance doesn't necessarily conduct championships. But what are some of the other areas that the Alliance supports? How does the Alliance support this community here in the room today?
Sure. Well, we, as you said, we don't do competitions and we don't do programs. We aspire to support the adaptive community, at large. We were established in 2001 after some working groups in the mid-90s when the golf industry realized that the ADA only addressed the buildings, it didn't address the actual golf facility, like it didn't address campgrounds. That has since changed. There's guidance now related to the ADA. What we're working hard to do is to take a lot of these resources that we've collected over the years, over the last couple of years, and really break down the ADA, distill it down into usable parts. It's a big government document. It's very complicated, and you can get lost in it in a hurry. And so what we've done is we've created some education for golf facility leadership and staff. I'll talk about some of this stuff a little bit later. But so we try to simplify it so that operators can go where they need to go to kind of see those critical things you need to do to create an accessible and inclusive environment which supports our mission, increasing participation of people with disabilities in the game of golf. It's not very complicated. We think most golf facilities around the country are doing a lot better than we think they might be. We've got a self-assessment process we'll be talking about a little bit later. focus on helping owners and operators better understand how to be prepared for what is a rapidly increasing demand. The GiA&x came out in 1990. Adaptive golf is not a new thing. The National Community Golf Association was formed about 75 years ago, but with the amazing coverage from USGA Adaptive Open and some of the stuff, there's a real upswell and a desire to participate. And I love veteran programs, but the beauty of this job is we get to serve all demographics and all disabilities. So kids, adults, veterans, and non-veterans trying to bring them into the game.
Awesome. Well, you're doing a lot of great work. Colton, get me kind of back into some championship information. So a lot of different impairments are in adaptive golf. What's the approach? Maybe share a little bit about the different impairment categories and then the approach that you take to try to create an equitable playing field amongst all the participants in the championship, from what tees they're playing to how the golf course is marked, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's something that you'll spend a lot of time on, and I think at the base level, eligibility is one thing that kind of comes up a lot with AGAs and new players to the game. With it's just it can be a little bit of a process for new players to kind of get that baseline WR4GD pass, which is more or less your Paralympic kind of standard of eligibility. To that point, I do want to kind of plug Shelley Ryan Ability Lab here in the U.S. out of Chicago. They've done a great job of helping along that process of new players here in the States. And we now have the most medical assessors of any nation in the world, which is something that we're proud of and super happy to work with Shirley Ryan on that. And that sort of baseline kind of leads into kind of how you divide up your impairment categories. What we've done for US Adaptive Open is try to be as similar as possible to that Paralympic standard, while also, trying to level the playing field, not only amongst your overall competition, but within each impairment category, because each sub-impairment is going to have levels of impairment, and it's important that they can all compete equitably. One way to do that is through yardage adjustments, which is what we've seen. And I touched on it in the sort of inside the ropes part earlier, but having that variety of tees, we go up to almost 6,500 yards for the longest set of the Adaptive Open, and all the way down to just below 4,000 yards. And in some ways, you're setting up multiple golf courses in sort of the same competition, which can be tricky. And then along that same lines is, when you're thinking about hole locations, you have to think about it a little bit differently than you would for any other non-adaptive competition. They need to be accessible, and then also the challenge is how do you also make it a good challenge for the best players in the field. So there's kind of a line you got to toe there with hole locations. With course marking, it can get interesting. I think that if anybody was at Sand Creek this year, it was probably unlike any other USGA marked golf course that you've ever seen. And once you're out there marking a golf course for an adaptive event, it makes a lot of sense. When you're looking at players who may have limited mobility or maybe in a seated cart, sometimes those penalty area lines may need to go down off a slope or up above the slope, so they can have that relief area that makes sense. And lastly, just sort of some of the things built into Rule 25 helps have an equitable competition, but looking at those model local rules and if they apply for your field is also important. And then one of the last things I'll touch on too that just kind of popped in the head, I wasn't planning on mentioning it, but yellow flags and yellow flag sticks for vision impaired players, it's those things like that we learned along the way that are some of those things are featured in our adaptive golf handbook that I'm sure I'll forget some today, so it's a good resource on USGA.org. But what we heard from the blind golfers community after the first US Adaptive Open and how we've changed to kind of at our normal USGA red flags, but a lot of times with vision impaired athletes, the color contrast is really difficult to see. But if you have that yellow flag stick, the color contrast is obviously a little bit different when you have the trees and the grass in the background. So super helpful things like that we found along the way that we try to make the competition as equitable as it can be for a lot of different impairment levels.
And that's an example of something we did learning in the space by having had staff at the first couple of US Adaptive Opens. We heard that, we got those flag sticks and implemented them at our event.
Yeah, Colton so just a quick follow-up, I know you all are collecting a lot of data at the championship. Is that data available to all of us as far as, like what yardage should we be utilizing for various experiment categories? Is that in the playbook? And is that kind of revised on a consistent basis as you all can conduct the championships and learn more?
Yeah, that yardage, kind of yardage recommendations, certainly in the adaptive golf handbook, as you mentioned, obviously available for any kind of outreach for anyone new to AGA, any new AGAs trying to run events. I'm always available for those questions. And it's something that's kind of ever evolving. To your point, we see kind of new levels of impairment within each impairment categories every year, and it's something that we're having to keep adjusting to more or less. But definitely, those resources are always available.
Mario, obviously you just finished your inaugural championship. There's probably a lot of folks in the room here that are contemplating conducting their first adaptive golf championship. What advice would you share with our IHA community on just taking that first step?
Sure. So for us, it was spending the time to study the community, to understand what we needed to do to have the positive impact we wanted to have. So we were fortunate the prior year in 2023, we hired a worldwide intern with a focus on adaptive golf. And her name is Anna Kittleson. She's now with us as our manager of adaptive golf. But for her first year, she went out, she went to every event we could find to send her to, every other association. She went down to Georgia for your event, she went to Northern Ohio with Rob's group, wherever we could send her to learn, to meet people, and to understand and put us in that best position to succeed when the time came. And then prior to the championship, we ran monthly clinics leading up to it. We got the equipment we needed and things like that. And that's why ultimately this year we were able to get a 60-player full field, with about 55 with some late withdrawals, but we had people from 20 different states, 4 different countries came to play in this event. None of that would have been possible without us putting in that requisite time before. So I would say to anybody who's studying that and thinking about launching, make sure you put the time in, make sure you learn the community, you understand who these golfers are, what their wants and needs are. You have to do it that way to do it right. I think that's what I've advised anybody. It's not caution, it's patience, right? You have to, it's different from everything we've done at GAP in terms of the audience and what we're doing there. So we wanted to make sure, like I said, that we did it right, and having that 1-year runway is, I think, the reason why we've been able to have as much success as we had this year.
That's great. So again, there's several associations across the U.S. and Canada that are conducting adaptive golf championships. Kind of the beauty of our IHA community is learning from each other. So if some of you are again anticipating or having discussions around conducting an adaptive championship, I think all of us that are conducting those would be more than willing and would be happy to share all the information and learnings that we've had over the years of conducting these championships. So Dave, kind of go back to you. Again, a lot of resources available through the Alliance. Can you talk a little bit about the Education Hub and GiA&x for the community, just so they're aware that is available?
Yeah, sure. So last year we launched GiA&x, the Golf Access Inclusion Network, and it's not social media. It's basically a networking forum. Requires username and password. Everything we offer is free. But we created that to kind of just get away from social media a little bit, where you could have some really good, honest, professional dialogue. But the target audience for GiA&x is anyone who's interested in being in the adaptive golf space, whether that's golfers looking for places to play, whether that's family members who are looking for avenues from a wellness standpoint for some of their family members. We've got our fair share of industry experts on there now who can answer questions. And so GiA&x is really just the kind of core of one of our communication efforts. Also on GiA&x is where we host a lot of our resources. And those resources include a link to the Education Hub, which you can also get on our public website. But also we've got policy templates. I'm a golf operator, and I can tell you I wish I knew then what I know now about how to handle certain situations at the golf course, whether it's a service animal or cart path only scenarios. I mean, we all have those at the counter. And so what we try to do is put some policy templates out there that guide you in a way to handle situations like that and make it a real positive customer service experience for both you and the golfer. Because in the end, that's all they want. They want the conflict. They want to play golf. So that's kind of where our resources are at. On the Education Hub, we've at the sort of volunteer training, really proud of that. GAP, as well as Arizona, has taken advantage of that, which we really appreciate. We've had over 200 people do the volunteer training. We've had 12 states have accessed it so far, so we're excited about taking advantage of that as well. And the goal of volunteer training is really 30 minutes. And if you're running that event with an adaptive program, you can send your volunteers a link, okay, and in 30 minutes they can just learn a little bit about the types of disabilities they'll be working with, some of the impairment categories, disability communications and etiquette, because we don't know what we don't know. In the end, they're all people first. They want to be treated like people, and so it just, I think, makes everybody a little bit more comfortable as far as how they're dealing with that. Also, on the education platform, it is our onboarding series of training, which is 3 hours worth of education, start and stop whenever you want it. PJ members, CMA members, LPGA, GCSA members get education credit for doing it. And it gets back to what I talked about earlier. It takes the ADA in 3 hours to tell you what you need to know, right? And if you start with that, it's a great place to kind of get everybody in your staff kind of up on the same page, because in order to have a great culture in the facility, you got to have leadership and staff buy-in. And so we're proud of that. And the other piece of that is the self-assessment process. So again, we're focused on where people play, and they do competitions at these places. We've got a process in there where a course can easily assess themselves. Do you have a barrier-free environment? Do you have a couple key elements that make your course attractive to golfers with disabilities? And quite honestly, if you're going to have an adaptive golf tournament in the future, it's probably something you want to do. Do a self-assessment, because when the USGA shows up, they're going to be asking questions. Go around, I'm sure, to make sure it's a course that's playable and to work with disability problems and issues.
Awesome. And share with us the URL for the Alliance.
Accessgolf.org, www.accessgolf.org. And also on the public side, we've got micro lessons. They're about 5 minutes long. So if you think in terms of frequently asked questions, such as what can I ask somebody that shows up at the golf course with a service animal? What can you not ask them? So it's a great place to get quick questions answered in a hurry that would, again, help your staff, your forward-facing staff, and each department be a lot more comfortable with what's going on.
Awesome. Great job. So as we mentioned, in addition to competition, there's associations that are doing adaptive golf programming. GAP has been doing that for a while. Mario, why don't you share with us a little bit about what GAP is doing in that space outside of competition?
Sure. The first thing we did with the adaptive programming prior to the championship was, as I said, in April, we started our clinics. We call them the no limit clinics, because there's no limit to anyone being able to play golf. Between the equipment available, the lessons available, we can find a way to get you on a golf course or get you out to a clinic and learn the game. And so we started doing those about twice a month. We had 3 participants in some of them. We had 20 of those. Really, the 20 is about our maximum size there. And we move them throughout the GAP region. We have a PGA professional instructing in all of them. And they're 90 minutes, give or take. We have kids as young as 7 years still there, and we have, I think the oldest person in the clinic is 74. So big age range there of people coming to the clinics, and it was a really nice way. As when we thought about starting our adaptive golf program, we had those 2 paths. We had the competitive path, bringing people from around the country, around the world to play in our adaptive championship. But then we had this instructional path of just bringing people into the game. And a lot of them are never going to be people who even want to compete in our championship, but they want to come back, or they want to come to golf, they want to learn about it. I'll give you a quick story there. We had an individual came to our first clinic this year, happened to be the mother of one of our board members. Used to play golf all the time. She'd had some nerve damage and stopped playing the game 20 years ago. We had some adaptive equipment and a glove to help her out and help her be able to swing a golf club again. She left there in tears that first day because she was playing golf again. She was scheduled to see time with her friends 2 days later. That's not somebody who's going to come play in our championship, but we can still make the impact that way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we've seen in our program as well, is people who played the game previously to some type of injury or accident. And a lot of the folks that we see are not, I wouldn't say they're disabled. They've had a traumatic brain injury, or they're a stroke survivor, and they're, through our programming, they've been reintroduced to the game. There's specialized equipment that can be used, instructional resources to allow them to begin playing the game again. And that's a perfect example of someone that played golf before, thought they might never play again, but through these opportunities, can try it again.
And somebody who's not going to qualify for a GD pass in a lot of these cases, but that's somebody who we didn't think we would have an impact on when we created our adaptive golf program, and we've come across multiple stories like that. That's exciting to see.
Colton, back to you. I think a lot of us that are in this adaptive golf space have found an outpouring of support from volunteers. An opportunity to give back to this community of golfers. Maybe share kind of your experiences with volunteers at the US Adaptive Open specifically. What are some of the roles outside of kind of the traditional rules committee that some people may want to learn more about in the volunteer space?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, we've had hundreds of volunteers every year for the Adaptive Open, which is awesome. Had to cut it off at Pinehurst because we just didn't have the need for that many. So it's been awesome, the outpouring of support from volunteers and local communities, and not just locally, but we get people from all corners of the U.S. That want to come and help out with the championship. So that's been awesome. And this demographic of players is unlike any other, that we see at USGA championships. And the players are so appreciative of the volunteers' time and want to talk to them and get to know them a little bit more. And after we do that, the first couple of championships, we introduced a new social event last year. After round two, we had an ice cream social where, championship dining, we had the players, we had volunteers, staff, club staff, kind of all in one place, and just really having some ice cream and getting to know each other a little better. And again, like I said, not something you usually see at a USGA championship with players and volunteers sort of just sitting at the same tables and enjoying one another's company. To your point about education and different roles, I think that we distributed a terminology sheet that's also available on the Adaptive Golf Handbook, where we distribute that to all volunteers pretty early. That way they know kind of what the different impairment categories mean, some do's and don'ts to get started to that kind of people first line of communication that we want even the volunteers to have while they're doing their work with the Adaptive Open. As far as roles, I would say it doesn't differ that much from other USGA championships. One thing that we do have more of is spotters on the golf course. And that's just, again, due to the nature of the championship with 5 different sets of tees, and have some players that maybe hit it 120, 150 off the tee, and then you got the top level is 330 off the tee. So additional spotters are necessary just because of that. And then around the clubhouse with as much that is going on, I'd say we have even more sometimes, just with having open doors and providing assistance if needed, and then keeping carts moving. We have probably a little over 200 carts on site, so they have to park somewhere, and keeping those places clean and keeping traffic moving around the clubhouse is a couple areas that we try to make work for the Adaptive Open.
You want to talk to them?
Well, I was just going to say, the USGA did the ice cream truck. Philadelphia made the cheesesteak truck, so that's what we had to do there. But volunteers for us was very similar to what Colton was saying. One role we had to have was we had ball spotters who also had a little additional responsibility of if there's a fairway bunker, they rake that bunker for the players just to keep things moving, keep things going there. Like Colton talked about, our 60 golfers, everybody had their own cart. We also had, they could have a caddy with them. And we had an official at each group, but we wanted to keep things moving, so we said, hey, if you hit a fairway bunker, you go hit your next shot, just go to the next shot, have somebody take care of that behind you. Not something we would typically see. And then otherwise, our volunteer efforts were focused on, from the minute the player pulled into the parking lot, somebody greeted there, show them where the locker room was, or show them where the driving range was, or player registration, whatever it was. We didn't want them to feel any confusion about where to go, what they needed. So we stationed somebody along the way. We had about 50 volunteers each day at ours, plus our full staff, which was also exciting that everybody wanted to be there to be part of it.
What was the volunteer pool, a mix of club members and normal GAP volunteers?
Correct. Obviously, rules officials, and that was the majority of our GAP volunteers, although we did have some other AGAs come help us out, which was really appreciated. And then at our 2 clubs, they chipped in and helped a lot of those run that ball spotter, parking lot, greeter, that kind of role, and give them a way to feel ownership and pride in the championship.
Dave, back to you. Obviously, our community here touches thousands of golf facilities. You have a chance to speak to them. What would you tell our community related to how they can be a good resource for facilities in their area with related to adaptive golf.
Sure. Well, first, I didn't mention we exist due to long-time support from all the leading golf industry associations. That's pretty much where our support comes from. The USGA has been instrumental in our organization's success for many years. We've got a grant program that we're hoping to rekindle in 2025, designed for grassroots programs. It's going to augment things after make-off and thing. But where you can really help us is just help us share to your member facilities that this education is out there. I mean, we certainly can go through the Owners Association, the PGA, and the LPGA are very helpful in helping us get the word out. But you've got to get courses from different directions, because those of us that operate golf courses, you get hit from a lot of different directions. And so just helping us share the word about the education platform. I answer my phone when you call, I answer my email, so if you need help learning how to kind of set that up or where to steer people, just give me a call. But that'd be the biggest help, is just help us get the word out. Because again, we're just in it for that reason, just to get education out there.
So before we open it up for questions from the audience, kind of one more question for each one of you. I think one of the most rewarding aspects of being around adaptive golf is the people and stories of perseverance. Maybe just kind of go down the road here, maybe one story either from a programming opportunity for you, Mario, or for the competition that just kind of resonates and kind of help emphasize how special adaptive golf is.
Sure. What I would say there is similar to what we've heard earlier. We've got all the social components around our sites. We had a couple of clinics leading up to the event and on that weekend. And we had a welcome reception on Sunday evening. We had the start between rounds on Monday evening, but Sunday evening I see 3 younger players coming in, and I'd seen their bios. We presented a bio sheet for all our volunteers, a picture and stats about every player, but they were 3 people from the University of Arizona's adaptive golf team. The University of Arizona, the only university that has an adaptive golf team like that. The university paid to send them out there. It's the first time they traveled to an event like that. And get to talk to each of them, who all ended up there in Tucson for 3 separate paths, none of them from the state. And they were so proud of being able to come play, to give a final place to play on an adaptive golf team in college, and to come to compete in the sport and be able to travel like that and compete. It was such a unique thing that I'm very excited to hear that story from them.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Colton?
This is probably the hardest question to answer. Seriously. I even think back to being a part of GSGA clinics and seeing instruction loggers and people with traumatic brain injuries coming in, and kind of the game of golf just changing their life and becoming part of their rehab. That's just unbelievable to be a part of. Somebody from the Adaptive Open this year, obviously we are our women's champion, Bailey Fish. She's a good story to highlight. 3 years ago, she could only play 9 holes at a time. Saw the Adaptive Open coverage on Golf Channel and made it a goal to one day play in the Adaptive Open, and through her hard work and competing at regional events, and ultimately got into the Adaptive Open last year and played, and then just again 3 years later, she's holding the trophy on her. So her story is one that's super impressive.
Yeah, no doubt there's going to be many more like that in the future. Dave, how about you?
Sure. For me, when I got involved in this in the 2000s, after some meeting days, I was working with a program up in Maryland, student for golf association. One of my first students was probably 22-year-old veteran, no legs, 1 arm, and a wheelchair. With this similarly aged wife next to him, he was struggling to get a golf ball with 1 arm. But the second he got that golf ball, that first golf ball, up in the air, the look on their faces says it all about how important this is. And as these gentlemen will attest to the competitions that I was attending, the level of support that these golfers give each other in a competitive environment is enlightening. And so I would encourage you to get out there and check one out, because it will change the way you perceive adaptive golf, and in the end, they're golfers. That's it.
Yeah, I think we've really seen from at least the competition side that they really are a family. A lot of them travel together, they root each other on. In the competition, you don't necessarily see people, pulling for each other when they're in the same competition, but it's a little bit different in that golf space. So, thank you all so much for answering those questions. We'll kind of turn to the audience now. You guys have a wonderful resource up here. What questions do you all have for our panelists?
You charge an entry fee, you have a recommendation for the level of entry fee charges?
So when we did a gap this year, we charged $150, and it was really 2 rounds of golf plus all the other activities, all the food and beverage that was included there. What we tried to do was to tell the players, we get to Philadelphia, we'll have the rest taken care of. We also, thanks to our foundation and their support of our event, our foundation approved a travel stipend for every golfer who came in to help them with their hotel costs, travel costs, whatever it might have been. We would love to make the event free, but we wanted them to have some skin in the game so they would not be a little loose on the withdrawal options or whatever it might be. But that was something that in our surveys was really appreciated, the fact that we helped them cover those travel costs, ultimately, which was a Visa gift card for $250.
Yeah, I think we're very similar in Georgia for our entry fee. I think it's 150 or 175. Kind of like you all like Gap, we help subsidize a lot of the additional expenses. That just put the competition on. Colton, do you have
Yeah, similar to other USGA championships regarding entry fee and how that all works.
follow-up question?
So you mentioned you had 60 entries. Do you find that the managing that's probably the math you can put on it in regards to being able to manage the players and get them around the course?
That was our goal number this year, and honestly, with doing that event on October 14th and 15th, the first day we had everybody go off the first hole, and so we really couldn't have done a lot more based on the pace and the amount of golfers out there that day. We'll see where that thing goes in the future and whether we'll move around the calendar, but ultimately we couldn't have done a lot more than that this year anyway. It's just based on the amount of daylight we had.
Do you have any insights on field size?
I mean, we're constantly trying to get the field size bigger. It's something that we're trying to work through. Right now we're at 96, all in the morning wave off 1 and 10. Have a cut after round 2, which this year was pretty incredible to see round 3 once we went off in 2s off 1 and 2. They played like almost too fast, like getting ready for awards and everything. But yeah, it's back to the experience with the USGA. I think we landed somewhere similar to 62. And so that number seems to be pretty common as far as in the AGA world.
The other thing we did with our 60 was we figured in the future, if we had the chance to continue to grow the amount of players wanting to play, because we have players from all over, not just the Gap region, we can then say, hey, we're going to take 15 as an example, 25% of the field reserved for local players, and still have, this year we have 13 categories represented.
Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to know about the way I really just wanted to, a lot of you in this audience, that were very appreciative of you taking time to do the data calls and data golf club. So about half the states did it, and so what we're going to do now, we've got a good foundation of where a lot of these cards are. We're going to relaunch our programs and facilities in our database, which will be a free resource again. So when you see that pop out, you help us get that formed out because again, golfers are looking to find out if there's an adaptive golf ball at that facility, if that facility shares one, and there's a lack of them. That's the reality. That's the elephant in the room. We're all working on that. But the more information we get out there about those programs and where these folks travel to and want to play golf with others, so appreciate the assistance on the first day of call for the next wave.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, another callback to what we talked about earlier, and talking about eligibility. Since I got a lot of people from a lot of parts of the country in this room, if there's any doctors or PTs that are involved with your AGA, please let me know. Find me at some point this week. I'd love to talk to you about if you think they may have an interest in becoming a medical classifier. We have the most of any nation, like I said, but we're constantly looking to add more, especially here on the West Coast and sort of that mountain region. We've got a pretty decent amount on the East Coast, but we could really use a lot. We want that process to just be really easy for new players to begin.
We have 2 this year that are assessors now, and 3 others have expressed interest in it as an example for the future.
Awesome. Any other questions before we wrap up? All right, one more.
So you have different categories. You like players based on what you play in the category.
That WR4GP pass that we talked about in the Colton reference puts them into a certain classification category based on this assessment from a medical professional. they compete within that category.
Yeah, at the Adaptive Open, it's sort of, everybody's competing for an overall championship, and then within each impairment category, they're sort of competing for medals as well. So it's something that we've seen, at least in this country. The players here in the States like to compete against similar impairments. They want to know who's the best one-arm player and who's the best leg impaired player. So that's kind of how that we've seen it done at the Adaptive Open. It's a little bit different internationally, but hopefully, kind of working towards getting all that lined up pretty soon.
One of the things we were able to do this year with our second round was when we did the repair was we kept the top overall players together in the last couple of groups, but after that, trying to strategically put some category competitors against each other. And I know we had two short stature players who were the two best on our field, and they had not played against each other in the same group like that. So not only were they able to play together, but they were competing against each other. It came down to 2 shots between them. So they both of them expressed thanks for us putting them in the same group together for that competitive aspect.
Awesome. Well, as you can see, this adaptive golf space is only growing and expanding. So I think we've met our allotted time. Gentlemen, thanks for being on the panel today, and I hope you all have enjoyed this experience and learned something.